3 cities, 3 completely different price tags. Here's what it actually costs to live in Toronto versus Calgary versus Montreal in 2026. Housing first, because it's the biggest expense. Average home price in Toronto is over $1 million. In Calgary, it's $764,000. In Montreal, it's roughly $570,000. Monthly mortgage payment on a 20% down payment at 4.5%. Toronto, roughly $5,200. Calgary, roughly $3,900. Montreal, roughly $2,900. That's a $2,300 monthly gap between Toronto and Montreal just on the mortgage. Rent comparison. 1-bedroom average in Toronto is $2,300. Calgary roughly $1,500. Montreal roughly $1,400. 2-bedroom in Toronto over $2,700. Calgary roughly $1,800. Montreal roughly $1,700. Toronto renters pay roughly $900 more per month than Calgary or Montreal renters for a comparable unit. Property tax. Toronto's rate is low on a percentage basis, but the high home values mean the dollar amount is significant. Roughly $6,000 to $7,000 per year on a $1 million home. Calgary's effective rate is higher as a percentage, but on a lower valued home, the actual payment is comparable. Roughly $5,000 to $6,000. Montreal's property tax plus the welcome tax at purchase adds up. Roughly $6,000 per year, plus the one-time welcome tax of roughly $8,000 to $10,000 on a typical purchase. Provincial income tax at a $100,000 salary. Alberta charges roughly $10,000 in provincial income tax. Flat rate starting at 10%. Ontario charges roughly $6,500. Progressive rates starting at 5.05%. Quebec charges roughly $14,000. The highest provincial income tax in the country. Wait. Quebec charges more in income tax than Alberta. Significantly more. At a $100,000 salary, the gap is $4,000 per year. But Quebec has something the other provinces don't. Subsidized childcare at roughly $9.20 per day. In Ontario, daycare costs range from $1,500 to $2,000 per month. In Alberta, roughly $1,000 to $1,400. For a family with 2 children in daycare, Quebec's childcare subsidy saves roughly $18,000 to $24,000 per year. That more than erases the income tax disadvantage for families. Sales tax. Alberta has no provincial sales tax. Just 5% federal GST. Ontario charges 13% HST. Quebec charges roughly 15% combined GST and QST. On a household spending $40,000 on taxable goods, Alberta saves roughly $3,200 versus Ontario and $4,000 versus Quebec. Car insurance. Ontario is the most expensive province for auto insurance. GTA average over $2,600 per year. Brampton nearly $2,900. Alberta's private market averages roughly $1,600 to $2,000 depending on driving history and location. Quebec's public system through SAAQ averages roughly $750. The cheapest in the country. Now let's add it all up for a family of 2 adults and 1 child earning a combined household income of $150,000. Toronto, total monthly cost. Mortgage or rent roughly $3,500 for a modest home or $2,300 renting. Property tax roughly $550. Childcare roughly $1,500. Insurance auto, roughly 220. HST impact on spending, roughly 430. Provincial income tax, effectively lower than Alberta. Total estimated monthly outflow, roughly 7,000 to 8,000. Calgary, total monthly cost. Mortgage or rent, roughly 2,800 or 1,500 renting. Property tax, roughly 450. Childcare, roughly 1,100. Insurance auto, roughly 150. No PST. Provincial income tax higher than Ontario. Total estimated monthly outflow, roughly 5,500 to 6,500. Montreal, total monthly cost. Mortgage or rent, roughly 2,200 or 1,400 renting. Property tax, roughly 500. Childcare, roughly 200, subsidized. Insurance auto, roughly 65. QST impact on spending, roughly 500. Provincial income tax, highest in the country. Total estimated monthly outflow, roughly 4,500 to 5,500. Montreal wins on total monthly cost, despite having the highest income tax. The childcare subsidy and cheap car insurance erase the tax disadvantage completely. Calgary comes second with no sales tax and moderate housing costs. Toronto comes last on almost every measure. But here's the nuance. Montreal's job market is smaller and more concentrated in certain industries. Salaries average lower than Toronto or Calgary for comparable roles. The language requirement limits opportunities for unilingual English speakers. Calgary's economy is strong, but exposed to energy sector cycles. Toronto has the deepest job market in the country and the most career options. You pay a premium for access to those options. The cheapest city isn't always the best city for your specific situation. But the numbers don't lie. The same family living the same lifestyle spends $2,500 to $3,500 less per month in Montreal than in Toronto. Over 10 years, that's $300,000 to $420,000. Which city would you choose? Drop it in the comments.